Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Social Science Tonight. On tonight's episode, we'll be talking about echo chambers, thanks to our special guest, Dr. Ryan Dromoski, and here he is now. Hello, everyone. Greetings. Hello. Hi. How you doing? Jim, it is a pleasure to see you over there. So tonight, we're going to be talking about echo chambers, something that I'm very familiar with as I study it. What is an echo chamber, you may ask? An echo chamber is basically people that you select who are like you, and you get information from just those types of people. By only getting your information from a select group of people that are very similar to yourself, you create what is known as an echo chamber effect. This effect is where the information that you're receiving is only going to be similar to what you think, and there will be no discrepancies to challenge your views. Now, for those of you wondering how people get into these echo chambers, I think we have to start at the base problem, which is homophily. And homophily is the tendency for us to get attracted to people who are like us. So, as I've been saying over the past couple minutes, is when people you like are in your friend group, you are not going to get much difference in the opinions, political views, or anything that is out of the ordinary to challenge what you believe on your social media platforms. And once you start to get into that idea, it's now going to change to where everything that you see will only support what you think. And as studies show, this is not very good if we want to grow as human beings, because we get into this hive mindset almost on a single thing, and it can possibly lead to a lot of polarization, which can be harmful to society. I do agree with you there, Dr. Ryan, but what about their studies? How many studies have been done on this to really show these effects? Love to hear that point, Jim. Now, when we talk about studies, I think the main one is a 2015 study done by Bakshi with a couple other people, where they identified 10 million Facebook users who identified as either liberal, moderate, or conservative. So, in doing so, they first looked at the idea of homophily. Who are they surrounding themselves with? Is there any differences in their views on their platform for social media? How much info about their echo chambers, if there is one? How much info about the algorithm only showing you the news feeds? So, you got to consider that maybe just by the algorithm seeing what you like is how you're getting your information. And how much it does with your own self selecting what you want to see, such as selective exposure. Now, the graphs after the results of the study were found showed that actually an echo chamber was more influential on their identities than a filter bubble was, and it was also not as strong in its influencing as selective exposure was. Now, what does this mean? I think we can be reasonable here and think that although social media has the dangers of creating echo chambers for ourselves, it's also entirely on us to make these echo chambers, because we're the ones who decide of who we want to see and who we want to be a part of. So I think what the issue is that people don't have enough friends who differ in their own viewpoints in order to challenge them to see the other side or learn more about the other side. And that is why the echo chambers are so dangerous, because there's no help from outside sources to show you a different kind of opinion or viewpoint, or just all in all, just like a better side of the story if there is one. And the second study that I would like to mention was done by Muse and a couple other people using a large panel of desktop users and web users to categorize their browsing behaviors to see any significant effects of possible filter bubbles or echo chambers. The results ended up polling that older people, so 6% of Republican older people had echo chambers and 6% of older people, Democrats, had echo chambers. However, people who consume from a website rather than the TV like older people, only 2% of Dems and Republicans had an echo chamber. But in overall, about 12 to 15% of Americans had an echo chamber of some sort, while only 4% of the Americans had one-sided information. So once again, it kind of shows this idea that echo chambers are always going to be around, but they're also entirely on us, because we're the ones who are deciding what we want to do, where we're getting our news from, where we want to see our news appear, and who we are getting it from in terms of that homophily. This is incredible stuff here, Dr. Ryan. However, how about for our viewers, how would someone combat those echo chambers and identify themselves as falling into that trap of an echo chamber? And if you could, explain it in a little simpler terms for the younger generations watching. Jim, you're going to have me sounding like a broken record to these kids. So, how do we identify ourselves falling into an echo chamber? Well, you look on social media or whatever platform that you get your news from, and you start to see no differences from what you want to see. So in terms of like, say you're a Democrat and you really like Joe Biden, and all you're getting is Joe Biden information, Democratic information, and there's no discussion of Republican matters or Libertarian matters or any other political party that's not Democratic in your feed. This creates an issue of you falling into the trap of an echo chamber where you're only getting information surrounding what you like. And so how to break out of this is that you recognize the confirmation bias. You recognize yourself falling into that trap by only seeing like, oh, hey, like I'm only getting Democratic things right now, which isn't always a bad thing because it kind of like makes us feel secure that we're like surrounded by people who are similar to us. But at the same time, we have to realize that we have to challenge our beliefs if we truly want to grow. I would do this by talking to people on the other side. I know it's very difficult when you, in terms of like being a very extreme Democrat and an extreme Republican going back and forth with one another, but if you can find a friend who is very moderate or slightly differs to what your side is, it would be beneficial for you to kind of like talk to them about these political issues to just see what they say and see if it challenges your belief. And then if it challenges your belief enough, you can go out there and look it up yourself and then discover more news from a different perspective. I would also say that you diversify your media diet and watch the people you follow, because diversifying the media diet just goes hand in hand with watching the people you follow, because diversification allows you to get more information from other sources that are non-democratic. In addition to this, you also can follow different people who will give you different perspectives on said information or on certain topics or issues that is going on in society today. Last point I would bring up to combat this echo chamber idea is don't just get your news from social media. That is where the dangers result in that, and that is where the biggest influencer of these echo chambers come from. Because by only getting your news from social media, you are risking the idea of only getting news that is very persuasive, but also could be fake, and you think that it's real because it's on your feed and you're like, oh, I trust the people that I'm around. So there's always those dangers along those lines. So you just really have to watch yourself and be cognizant of how you function on social media. Well, I thank you for your time, Dr. Ryan. Is there any closing remarks that you want to say to our audience before we end this podcast? Well, Jim, I know I just threw a bunch of information at you guys and yourself, Jim, but one thing I want to really touch on is what I briefly mentioned prior, is that these echo chambers, although they are real and they do create havoc, it is by your decision that you fall into these echo chambers. So knowing yourself and watching how you pick the people you're around and pick the way you get your information is very important in determining whether you will fall into an echo chamber or escape the echo chamber. So always just make sure to watch yourself. Stay safe, everyone. Enjoy your night. Well, folks, you heard it first from Dr. Ryan himself. Let's give him a warm goodbye here. Let's see it in the chat. And Dr. Ryan, thank you for a wonderful meeting with me, and I'm very happy to learn more about those echo chambers at a later time. Good night, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.